Do you struggle editing your sunrise, sunset landscape photos? Well, in today's video and live stream, we're going to take a look at how I go about editing them. And there's a few extra steps here that we're going to probably require, even though I'm shooting with, I won't go get it, but a A7 R Mark V, which has incredible dynamic range. Sometimes it's still not enough dynamic range to capture all of the light in a scene, especially when the sun is in the scene itself. Let me give you an example, right? So this shot here, if we go press D for develop, we can see that the foreground element is relatively noise free. If we just zoom in, we'll do 100%. Not a lot of noise there, which is good, but this sun is probably blown out, because if we pull back our exposure, you can see we've just got the big white blob up here. And so I assumed that would be the case. And so I did an exposure stack. So I took two images. Well, I took three images. One way overexposed. You don't need to bother with that. And then this one, which is underexposed. So we're probably going to have quite a lot of noise in the, well, some noise in the foreground. But we pull this back, we've got a lot more detail, and we've only got a tiny bit, which doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. I could have took another shot underexposed even further, but that part of the sky is going to be quite bright, probably something more like that. And so the details are there regardless. But if I overexpose this image by 2 stops, do we have any noise? Not really. Maybe a little bit. But to me, the noise in this 2-stop underexposed image is absolutely acceptable. So we've got a choice here. We can either just, and it always does my head in when I look at Lightroom, like, because we're not adjusting exposure here. The image has been exposed already, and we're adjusting brightness. So we could just adjust the brightness here of this image to +2 stops, which then would give us a pretty noise-free image to start editing from. And we've still got all the data in the sky here to work with, because we'll pull the sky down to balance out the image. Or we can do a exposure blend in Lightroom with these 2 images and get all the data that's possibly there. I think we'll probably not do that because I don't think it's needed. Now, one thing I have done is I've got the raw files and I've put them through DxO Pure Raw 6. I think it's Pure Raw 6. I mean, I'll just quickly show you that part of the workflow. Here's some other shots from that location. So let's say we wanted to use this shot here, which might be a slightly more interesting composition as I look at it. If we go to File, Plug in Extras, I'll use the preview and process just so I can show you what's going on within Pure Raw. So Pure Raw have sponsored content on this channel previously. They're not sponsoring this stream by any means. But I am a total, and yes, I do not want to update. I'm a total convert to this, and as a tool for denoising images and also adding lens, using the lens sharpness optimization. So let me show you what I mean. So we zoom into 200% here. It's doing its thing in the background and doing its processing. You will see the sharpening via the denoising and sharpening algorithm. It might take a while because obviously I'm live streaming from this computer as well. So this might not be the best way to demo it because my graphics card is probably getting hammered from both ends here. That was not supposed to be as graphic as it sounded. But if I turn off the lens distortion correction, you can see here the raw file on the left-hand side is, you can do some denoising as you import into Lightroom, and it's probably not going to look dissimilar to this, versus the denoising and sharpening that Pure Raw does on import. It's night and day, total convert. My man, Stuart McGlennon, landscape photographer from Lake District, put me onto this. And it's I wouldn't say, I could probably measure this. There's probably a video in there somewhere of how many stops of light can you now underexpose and still get the same results after the denoising and sharpening from Pure Raw. That might be a video for the channel. But regardless, I've run these images that I want to take a look at. through Pure Raw. And so these are the best starting points that we can possibly get. So we might not even bother doing an exposure blend of these two, because something that we've also got to take a look at is I wasn't happy in the field with the depth of field I was getting at F16. I think it was F16. F16. I wasn't happy that I'd captured the total depth of field because I'm relatively close to these rocks in the foreground. So I did an exposure blend, but also a focus stack. So let's just take a look at that first. So this is numbered 803. This one is 806. I always start my exposure, my focus stacks from front to back. So now I'm going to look at this image and I'm going to see, is the foreground sharp? Yes, of course it is. But is our background sharp? I would say that's pretty sharp. Even if we go to the very far background here, that is almost certainly more than sharp enough. Let's just compare it to, because this is the second shot, so this one will have focus probably on this rock here, or maybe on the background even. I can't really remember where I took the where I focused for the second shot. But I wouldn't say this is any noticeably sharper. Especially, so this is Ryland Cross. This is a war memorial here in Yorkshire. I don't know if that is noticeably sharper at 100% than that. So I did the right thing. I focus stacked it just in case, and it turns out that we're probably not going to need it. So I'm going to take this image here, which I definitely focused on one of these rocks in the foreground at F16, and this is one of like the myths that we can dispel on. We just did a video on myths, landscape photography myths, but this is a myth that we can absolutely dispel just from that small experiment there. F16 may technically lead to diffraction. You may have a slightly softer image technically on the back of shooting at F16 versus shooting at f5.6 on your average lens that you might be using. But the reality is, if this grass down here is as sharp as you're going to get it, and also we've also got the opportunity to do output sharpening at the end of our edit, right? And this tiny cross here, if we zoom into 200%, it's still pretty sharp. And all these rocks here are damn sharp as well. And these trees, there's maybe a bit of smearing across those there, but you can see where there's light hitting stuff. It's more than sharp enough. That just goes to show that shooting at F16 is absolutely appropriate. And if we can save you the hassle and the faff of focus stacking, especially in very windy conditions. It was 40, 50 mile an hour gusts as I was taking this, as you'll see in the video that will come probably next week now. As you'll see in that video with my everything just being blown around. So even though this was taken on a tripod, focus stacking those two images, the images are going to be shifted slightly because there's going to be movement because of those gusts of wind. If you can resolve all that by shooting at F16 and not being worried because some YouTuber said that it's going to lead to diffraction, you test this for yourself and look at the practical effects of all this, as opposed to just following people blindly online. Yeah, don't follow me blindly online either with what I'm communicating here. So that was a lot of rambling in the fact that we can now just edit this file, I think, and we can get rid of all of the rest of them. So I go through this slightly laborious process of opening my files in Photoshop rather than editing them in Lightroom directly. So I'm going to open this up. I'm going to convert it into a smart object just so that we can go backwards to any edits that we're going to do in Camera Raw here. And we're going to take a look at this image. So the first thing we want to do is balance out the image, essentially so we can see what the heck is going on. So do this very simply. We're going to create a very flat image here, but we're going to pull up the overall exposure, and we're going to pull down the highlights, pull up the shadows, and as you can see, we're starting to get a bit gray up here. And that now is 50% edited. This is going to be hopefully not a massively complex image to take a look at. And you go down the weeds of an image like this and lots of dodging and burning, which we'll definitely take a look at. because there is some light hitting these rocks, and these rocks need to have some shape and texture to demand interest from the viewer when there's all this going on with this beautiful ridge line and the beautiful light coming in from the right hand side. But as a starting point, we're going to start there. Then I want to take a look at the crop. So for me, it's a little bit heavy weighted in the sky. And this is something that I find a lot of people fall into the trap of in our landscape mastery program. And they see a big, beautiful sky, but that isn't the image. The image is the sum of all the parts of it. So I feel, especially if we zoom out, we've now got all the rocks on this side of the image. We've got lots of visual weight, and we've got lots of visual weight up here, and then we've got lots of dead space at the top of the frame. So the first thing is, I'm just going to straighten it off slightly, and what I'm using to straighten this is more the clouds than these hills, because there is a hill on this side, and so it looks wonky when it actually isn't. And now the clouds look like they're sloping down the side. So probably we're pretty straight in the first instance. So we'll go with that as a straightened image. And then I want to balance out the visual weight. I'm going to do that by losing a little bit of the sky. Probably coming in on this, losing this rock on the side over there a little bit, and then this rock in the foreground is not really doing us any favors. So something more like that. Sometimes when I'm cropping it, I feel like it does take a few attempts. I feel like we're now a little bit closed in on the foreground rock. So I want to keep the aspect ratio, because this is the aspect ratio that I have all the frames in my house with the mats kind of aligned with. So I want to make sure that they fit in the frames, because it's probably going to be a picture I'm going to print. So just pull it in slightly, something more like that. I think we still are a little bit too much on this side. And the thing is, when you're cropping it, you can always crop in further later on, but you can't crop out later on. So it's kind of important we get it somewhat right at this stage. Cool. If you've got any questions as we go through this, do fire away, because it's a lot more fun than just talking to one's self. He's got a question here, well, a statement or a question here from Mark. He says, I started with Pure Raw and eventually switched to DxO Photolab 9, which also has a Pure Raw engine built into the program. The ability to alter an image at the raw level brings me latitude in processing. Yeah, absolutely. One of the reasons I haven't switched to DxO 9, the Photolab 9, is it's slow, in my opinion, to like scroll through stuff. But that is because it's not the whole shtick of it is that it doesn't touch the raw files. So you have the raw files in your own folder structure. They are there. They're accessible. There's no manipulation of them. You can leave Photolab if you like, and nothing will have changed to your images. But because of that, because it isn't creating smart previews and importing and doing its kind of indexing like that, Lightroom is just way quicker for me, especially with these big old files from the A7R5. I would, but other than that, if there was a compromise there, I would probably switch to that too. Photolab 9 too. Right, so we've now got a half. I still think there's too much space on this side, but other than that, we've got a relatively well composed image with some nice light and some interesting features. I've never seen this shot before. Everyone shoots from the top of this ridge line going down. That's like the shot here. So I wanted to get off the beaten path a little bit and and do something a bit different, which I have done. So now I'm going to pull it into Camera Raw. What I might do here at this point is just do a new layer. Why the shortcut's not working? That's odd. Regardless, we will then just flatten this layer, flatten image, smart object. We can come back to it. Because I'm happy at this stage, right, that we're not going to have to go back to where we were previously. So now I'm looking at the overall contrast within the image itself. So I want the rocks to be brighter. Now, the quick and dirty way of doing this, obviously, is with gradient and subtly increasing the exposure. Now, I don't necessarily want the rocks here or the foreground to be so bright. So you might then go to subtract, get a brush, just brush it out of here. That's a quick way to getting these rocks a little bit brighter and be a little bit more subtle with this rather than a full stop. The other thing I'm going to do is just try and calm down the sky just a touch, because we can come back to that later on. So we're going to pull the highlights down. In fact, instead of doing that, we're just going to do a curve. First, I like to sometimes add a bit of contrast before then I pull the exposure down to compensate for the increased brightness that we've created. So you can see we're getting a lot more balance in the image at this point already. With these light beams, again, just a curve on these. So I'm looking for what would be essentially the middle point if this was a bit of a seesaw. And by subtly increasing the brights and decreasing the darks, the goal is just to make them a little bit more obvious. The shafts of light coming down. Oops, didn't mean to do that. And so, again, the image is still quite flat, but we've got a bit more balance here. And now we've got to decide what is the point of the image. Where do we want the viewer to go? What are we trying to get the viewer to look at? Well, in my mind, I want the viewer's eye to come in from the bottom right-hand corner, look at these two rocks, go along this ridge line, and then end with the kind of beautiful shafts of light and then the sun in the sky behind these clouds. One thing I'm going to do at this point, and it sets up a few things later on, is I'm just going to soften the light up here with a bit of negative dehaze. Just that slight bit of glow. It also deals with the fact that we had that tiny bit of clipping up there. So you can still use glow and then pull it back to again rebalance it out. A bit more negative dehaze. And we're just softening and reducing contrast. So I don't really want it where the light beams are. Fine. So now I want to work on these rocks because I want these rocks to stand out, because currently they don't really stand out from the foreground itself. So how do we get something to stand out? We can add contrast to the object versus the surroundings of it. Contrast can be light, dark, color, no color, opposing colors on the color wheel. There's a whole bunch of different ways of doing it. I think in this very instance, first, before we start to dodge and burn these a little bit, I'm just going to, again, just brighten them up. We might have to do an object selection here rather than, because it is trying to literally fit a square object in a round hole. As you can see, I'm not all that fussed about. I feel like when you mask stuff too specifically, very quickly you end up with hard edges. Whereas if you use lots of gentle maps that map gentle masks that do overlap every now and again, you end up with a more like kind of organic result. So I'll just use big old feathered masks all over the place rather than being kind of surgical, especially at this stage. Overall, I think our black point is pretty high. If you look down here, this should be a bit darker, so we can probably pull our black point down a little bit, add a little bit more contrast into the scene. So again, before, after, on this mask here, we're just going to brush out that little bit there. And then at this point, because we've pulled the black point down, we can add more brightness. So again, before, after. And at this point, I think for a lot of people, we wouldn't be far off an end result. So one thing I'm going to do is a vignette around the sun to see if we can just pull more again, more essentially it's more contrast, right, to this bottom part of the frame. Because I don't really care about this bottom part of the frame down here. I'm not really fussed on that. Is that too much? It's only one stop. Thing is, we can always come back and add more of a vignette after the fact, right? I just want this part down here just to be slightly brighter, just to match the front end of it. The vignette's just hitting this quite hard. And for kind of step one of our edit, to start to draw the eye through the frame in the way that we'd like and to emphasize the sky here, I don't think we're actually doing too bad. I mean, we don't want it too bright because we lose the effect that it is a beautiful sunset. So again, to get these rocks to stand out, we need some kind of contrast, and detail can act as contrast as well. So this is more of an experiment, but sometimes a bit of clarity on a rock like this, not so much that it looks gross and over-engineered, but just a tiny bit of clarity gives more perceived sharpness. And so again, this one will have less because it's slightly further away. So if the one was at like 11 on clarity, this would be a 3 or 4. That could probably remain as it is. The backside of this heather here should be quite dark, but it's a little bit too dark, I would say. Just so it's not distracting to us. So I'm going to go back to that vignette now. I think we can crank that bad boy up. Let's make it a bit bigger. Or crank that bad boy down, maybe. I think that vignette now is doing a good bit of work. So at this point, I like to use Luminar Neo and the AI tool. Not that I end up ever keeping it typically, but it does a good job sometimes of pointing out things that I could potentially work on. I don't always keep it because, and again, Luminar have sponsored the YouTube channel just for disclosure from that front. But I don't always keep it because it can do weird things in the sky and shift the color cast in weird places. But again, I do find it gives me a mental image of where we could take the image if we wanted to push it to be just go that little bit further. So again, as I'm streaming this, we might just grind to a halt. See, that to me looks now unrealistic, but maybe prettier. And it's just contrast that's added, really, more than anything else, which we could do manually ourselves in a second. Contrast and some color. And the sky enhancer I find is never very useful. It's just darkened the blue bits of the sky there. But would we keep a touch of that in there? I quite like what it's doing to the far kind of mid ground up here. So what I'm going to do is, well, it's in a smart object, so we can always get rid of it. So we'll apply that. Let's see how we're going. Give it a second. Fine. So you see how it's really brightened things up as well. So we need now another vignette to darken the edge, even though it's done a good job in the midground. What we're going to do before that, though, is I'm going to use a luminosity mask to start dodging and burning these rock faces. So only subtly, in that you can see there's like a bit of a pitting here and there's a dark shadow there. I'm going to use a very subtle mask. If we can just lighten the light parts of this. So it's not done a terrible job. So now we've got almost this line here that we can brighten to give some shape to this. So I'll create a dodge burn layer. And I'm going to pick the color that's in the sky as opposed to just pure white. I'm going to set the brush, hardness of 2, flow of 2, reduce the size a bit. I'm just going to brush onto this layer that's way too strong. We'll have to go 1 and 1. I'm just going to try and add a bit of kind of shape to the top of this. So the lighter parts, and you can find the lighter parts by holding Command and then clicking on the mask. This might still be too much. But if we turn that on and off, again, there's that little bit of depth added to the rock here. And then if you look at this, we can definitely attack this side, and this side is indirect sun. This side is, oops, go on the right layer. Isn't indirect sun, but is getting probably sun bouncing off the clouds above. We certainly do this face, which is, turn it again. Do this face, which is in the sun, as is this, and at the very edge there. And so it's only subtle, but it does add quite a lot of depth to these rocks here. And I like it to be subtle and then build it up. I suppose I quite enjoy editing. So if you've got the time to do this, if you don't have the time to do this, it's probably not ideal. And I use the luminosity mask here as a kind of a guide. So we can definitely go over the sides of the cliff face over here as well, because that's getting direct sunlight. So we'll just pop over there, brush on top of these. Obviously, we didn't do much of a selection of this, so it's only gonna touch those edges over there. And I wouldn't say we are too far off for an image like this. This isn't like the greatest of all landscape photos. It certainly isn't the most epic of scenes. This is like a pretty beautiful British Yorkshire scene. I'm pretty confident that it is a pretty a composition that hasn't been done. I wouldn't like, maybe not ever, but has not been kind of done a gazillion times either. So that has value to the image. From our luminosity masking and dodging and burning, maybe we'll do another mask and just burn some of these edges. Just darken them. Even I think that might be too much. So what this is doing, if you're unfamiliar, is creating a layer mask. And the layer in a layer mask, what is white, paint can go through, and what is black blocks the paint. So if I paint up here, I'll just quickly show you. Let me just go to a crazy color. Up here is black. So if I paint on the layer mask, it's not going to come through. Whereas if I paint down here where it's white, oops, I'm painting on the mask like a genius. If I paint down here, you can see the the pink's coming through or the purple's coming through there, versus you don't see any purple in the top, even though if we look at the mask itself, there is pink and purple on the mask. So let me undo that. So now I'm just going to go to black rather than using a color in the sky. Select my brush, make my brush slightly bigger. I'm going to brush into the shadows on this rock here, which is this kind of area here, that area. Again, that's quite substantial, the effect there, so we might come back to that and reduce it slightly. Again, just the shadow areas. And all we're trying to do is brighten one side, darken the other. And if you imagine a sphere, a ball, sorry, I said sphere, a ball, and if the light is shining front on, it's going to be just white and then maybe like a bit of black one side, or an outer edge of the ring if the light isn't perfectly in front. If the light's from the side, you can have, if the light is bright, you can have a lot of white on one side and pitch black on the other. If the light is soft and gentle, it's going to be slightly more tones of gray. So our job is just to help nature along with this, because we have two eyes. And so when we stand in front of a scene like this, the dark parts of it, the depth is really obvious. Versus we're trying to take what is a 2D scene that we're looking at and make it as 3D as what we saw with our two eyes. So our 2D is flat, 3D is multi-dimensional. We see in those dimensions. We're just trying to emphasize the depth that is already there to get it back to the point where it feels 3D. Did not explain that very well, but hopefully that makes sense. So what I said to do with my dodge and burn lasers, I'll put them in a group. I can turn the group on and off, and you can see here, these now look, especially this rock here on the right, it has a lot more depth than what it did previously, purely because we've done that bit of dodging and burning. What else do I want to do on this right now? Let's merge all these layers into a new layer, turn it into a smart object. I need to, if only there was a Simon of Photography Explained fame, our wizard with a coding, if only there was a panel that I could press one button and it did multiple things and would create smart objects on demand. That'd be really helpful. Hint, hint, at some point in the future. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a luminosity mask of range, luminosity range of the lighter parts of the image. I'm going to have to manipulate this. I'm just going to see if we can get a mask to just touch on the lighter parts where the sun is obviously hitting. So in something a little like, because what we can do with that is then just do a slight exposure, maybe. We'll do slight highlights. And this is essentially dodging and burning out the whole image rather than just the parts that we brushed onto it. So it might be, I mean, you see it in the sky, but it might be more difficult to see in the foreground, but it's definitely hitting all these grasses and everything down here. The other thing I'm going to do is do another, but in a color range. I'm going to select these grasses and I'm going to go to color, just increase the saturation. Because I don't want to increase saturation across the whole image, but I want these grasses to be a bit more, just to pop a little bit more. Again, might be difficult to see on the image itself on the live stream, but that pulls that up. So now I'm going to try another vignette because the old one basically got obliterated with the little tweak we did with Luminar Neo. So I'm going to select this, I'm going to invert it, go to light, pull that down. So this side of the frame up in the top corner is too dark. It's too much of a difference versus that side. But that adds a nice little bit of contrast and pulls my eye towards these rocks, makes these rocks seem brighter, which is what we're here for. These rocks are what's important in the shot here. One thing I'm going to do is just rather than crop, there's a tiny sliver of rock down there. We could crop it out, but I'm just going to remove it for ease of use. And then I'm just going to take a look at the sky up here. Can we soften this light? Can we essentially beautify this light just a little bit? And then I was going to edit a bunch of different images, but I am slowly out of time. Or slowly running out of time. So really soft feather, again, effects, dehaze, and I want to make it just gently glow. Because we've dehazed it, we've pulled saturation out of it. So I'm just going to go to color. I'm going to add some bit of warmth back in, just a touch. And sometimes it's just worth experimenting as to where this light is coming in. Because I think what we're going to do is do that subtly up there, then we're going to experiment with just a bigger radial gradient coming down here. This may be a disaster, but see how it just softens and adds a bit of almost, it's not Autumn effect, but it's almost like a bit of Autumn effect coming down the foreground there. So again, that's something to try rather than just agree on. Pull it down slightly. Again, just a bit more warmth maybe. Just touch it up. So that do camera raw. After we got into camera raw, I think we just need to lighten this. This rock here is just not quite getting. I think it's the position within the frame. It's because it's quite strong in the frame. It needs to be somewhat similar to the rock in the mid-ground here. I don't think we're too far off there. If I do say so myself, I think that's quite a nice image. So we're going to wrap with that there, and then we're going to go through the final step of my process, which is if I click save, I then do some output sharpening. So I use the Nick collection. There is news on the Nick. I got an email the other day. Maybe I shouldn't talk about it. I'm not going to talk about it. Maybe there is news on Nick collection. Maybe there isn't. Later, fine. So I find that this tool does, over to my taste, over sharpen just slightly. So if you look at this rock here, obviously we've gone from raw file to DxO pure raw to demosaic, denoise, and sharpen the image using the lens corrections on the way in. We haven't done any sharpening in Lightroom or Photoshop. And so on the way out, output sharpening, I use this tool. And you can see, even though on the way in, it was friggin' sharp, there's still room for this rock here. And you look at the grasses down there, you can see there's a slight bit of movement as the wind's blowing. This was a fast shutter speed, so those grasses were flying around if it's led to some movement in the shot. Even up here in the background, we'll go to these rocks here. This is what we looked at before. But even these rocks here, there's just a level of, it's not pop. I don't know. There's probably a technical way to describe it, and it's clarity, but not the clarity slider in Lightroom. It's not. It's obviously adjusting contrast to increase the perceived sharpness, but it does it in a really beautiful way. With that said, I never use the output sharpening at 100. I always go down to about 80 or so. 100 for me on the JPEG export is just a touch crunchy. So I'll now click apply. We'll save it wherever for the moment. And there we go, an edited image. So I don't know if this was useful. Hopefully it was. It's good to just spend time with you guys with a little bit more of a chilled conversational tone as opposed to the usual, like, here's a scripted YouTube video that we've worked on for 3 weeks. It's been a pain in the ass and a load of time and expense and resources and energy to put into it. So if you like these more, I don't know, informal videos where hopefully I can still teach you something, or it's nice just to hang out with photographers that are editing their images, then do leave a comment, let me know, because we can do more of them, because this is an absolute pleasure to put together. Not a problem to do, and I can do a couple of these each week. I've got enough photos to run through to do just that. So there's your final image. Hopefully, I could definitely soften the light up here just a little bit. So right, in fact, we've sharpened it, and so this is not the ideal place to do this, but to add again a little bit of softer glow up here, something I do often is just get a brush. Give me a brush. Why don't you give me a brush? Let's create a new layer for this. Big old brush. Big old brush. Then we've got hardness, flow, right down. And I'm just going to brush on top of this. So that might be a bit much. So what we'll do is just reduce the fill of this layer until we get it right. But often, I'm just going to warm this up slightly, see what that looks like. It's too much. Fine. So that little bit of softness there, which is the opposite of what most photographers feel like they want. I want that soft, gentle light up here, especially around here. I'm just trying to get into the edges, basically. You can see we've got almost like a bit of a hard edge around some of these bits. I just want to soften that edge with a brush, basically. It's all I'm trying to do here. And that just gives it that more like gentle light. Even go to a white as well, again. And then I will have to go for this because we've got a mentorship call for our landscape mastery community. So this is a subtle effect. You can decide if you like that or not, basically. But some people will even do that across other parts of the image just to soften things off a little bit. Again, up to you. You're kind of nudging nature in the direction you want it to be in, as opposed to reality when you start drawing light onto your images, rather than using sliders or adjustments to adjust the light that's already there. But there we go. I definitely need 5 minutes to work on this. The light up here just to probably brighten it, because I think we've got a gap. Well, let's just spend 5 minutes. All right. I would like you not to be a smart object. Rasterize layer. Fine. All I was going to do is go into the curves tool here and just pull this up so that we're not clipping, but we're on the verge of it, because the sun going through some clouds should be pretty bright, right? And there we go. That's where I would leave the image right there. So yeah, hopefully that was useful. If not, don't comment. If it was useful, do comment. I'll look at the number of comments, and if this was useful, we'll do more of them. Cheers, everyone. Speak soon.